I'm your cold boyfriend. We're talking about Pretty in Pink today, a 1986 teen film classic. Whatever. You get it? Look, I'm physical media. I'm a real fan of the film starring Molly Ringwald, the effortless immortal Molly Ringwald, John Cryer, Andrew McCarthy, Annie Potts, and secret MVP of the entire film, James Spader. But we'll get into James in a few minutes here. Even by Howard's own admissions, the director of the film, this was a Charlie. Why don't you just hold on to that? This was a this was John Hughes's vision, honestly. Hughes was intimately involved with the project from beginning to end. And Pretty in Pink marks the close of the Molly trilogy. 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink. I think Pretty in Pink is a phenomenal film, and I'm not alone. This film deservedly has a legion of fans behind it. It's charming, it's clever, it's it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film. The film is primarily interested in interclass dating, in like the rejected rebellious girl dating this heir to the throne of an electric company or something. It's about like a rich preppy kid falling in love with the outsider. There are quite a few things that make this film legendary. I think the most obvious thing is Ducky. Ducky's a fantastic character. John Cryer, I think, was unbelievably good in the role. The most legendary scene in the entire film is, without a doubt, without question, when Ducky, like a hurricane, just slides into the Trax record store and starts lip syncing and dancing manically, but truly passionately to Otis Redding. And a cinema icon was born. Ducky is in love with Andy, Molly Ringwald's character, and so is Blaine, Andrew McCarthy's character. Ducky is the physical embodiment of the outsider 80s teen spirit. He's a living embodiment of the outsider archetype, whereas Andrew McCarthy is conformity. He's extremely rich and he is also unbelievably sensitive. I think Andrew McCarthy did incredible as well. It's easy to get overshadowed by John Cryer when John Cryer is allowed to be as loud and bombastic as possible, as theatrical as possible. Andrew McCarthy was a bit more subtle, and his eyes tell a lot, reveal a lot. He's a very sensitive character, but ultimately, it's Andy like choosing between them in a sort of way. And there are two endings to this film. Um, the original ending, Andy ends up with Ducky, and that original ending was a lot more personal for John Hughes and expressed something sensitive about himself. Hughes always saw himself as an outsider. And Andy and Ducky dancing at the prom together was very meaningful to him. But the problem is that test audiences hated the ending. They actually got up and booed the ending. If you can imagine that, it's so weird. Considering the popular consensus, I think since the film was released, was that she should have ended up with Ducky. So they got everyone back together and reshot the ending where Andy ends up with Blaine. But I think that the ending is a very good idea, and I think it gets into a theme I want to discuss a bit more. Is that Pretty in Pink? Sure, it's a fantasy of sorts, right? Um, Wish fulfillment in a lot of ways, but it's also a tragedy. Ducky can't get the girl. It works on themes of all throughout the script. They're laying down this idea of like, is it okay? Like both sides have reservations about this. Both Blaine and Andy have like reservations about class and social stratification and distinctions. They're like, is it okay if I date this rich boy, or is it like okay if I date this poor girl, this poor like misfit girl? And the film does seem to be talking about like bridging a gap. And the original ending, the Hughes original ending, um, seems to say that that gap can't be fixed, and that might be a bit too radical, a bit too extremist for a teen film. Um, Audiences responded a lot more to the wish fulfillment of Andy ending up with Blaine, kissing him outside in front of his BMW. And I like to think that when John Cryer breaks the fourth wall as Ducky in that final scene where Christy Swanson is looking at him, like they try to like make sure that the audience isn't too sad about Ducky. I think when he looks at the camera, that is not simply a wink and a nod, it's recognizing that the film is artificial, especially at that point, that this is about artificiality, and this isn't a documentation of real life. Um, this happens in the movies. Fairy tales exist in movies. I think it's an admission of superficiality. I think the ending works for a multitude of reasons because I think the script is all heading straight towards it. There's a large part of me that doesn't really view this as a legitimate triangle at all. I don't. I don't. I never thought that Ducky was a viable candidate. I think he is like a tragic character, a very comedic character, and he clearly loves her more than anything. He'd die for her, and I believe him. He even fights James Spader, like fucking 6 foot something James Spader, to defend Andy's honor. And speaking of Spader, this is why I don't consider Ducky like a viable option within this love triangle. I don't consider it a love triangle. I think that it really is this metaphorical teenage tale about class disparity, about social distinctions, about a poor misfit girl and a rich preppy boy. And because both Andy and Blaine have this have a best friend who is like the living embodiment, the ultimate symbol of their group, of their clique, of their social role, of their archetypal one within a teen drama. Um, they 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 are best friends and associate with the living embodiment of their class. So for Andy, it's Ducky. He's extremist. He is very intense. He is outsider defining. He is everything that the outsider ought to be. Now, Andrew McCarthy, Blaine's analog, Blaine's confidant, Blaine's best friend, Blaine's symbol of ultimate conformity. This is where I think the film is brilliant and why I would call it a brilliant teen film. Because otherwise, if you just view it as a love triangle thing, it's a sanitized kind of teen fantasy. Because clearly Andy doesn't end up with the outsider and ends up with Blaine, and if she believes in herself like hard enough, she can move the one sensitive, preppy, rich boy. And that's nothing to champion, not at all, especially not within a teen movie. It's not. Teen movies are where you explore ideas of class and social stratification. Teen movies are where you reformat and rearrange the status quo. And if we view Pretty in Pink as a love triangle, it's more cowardly than it is courageous as a film because of that changed ending. So I still believe it's beautiful. I still believe it's brilliant because I don't think it's a love triangle, right? I think it is about completely refusing to accept the status quo of high school, of young adult life as anything authentic. It's about refusing to accept the status quo. It's about refusing to accept stratification. Um, and just like Andy has Ducky, Ducky has this constant reminder, this shining symbolism of the ultimate outsider identity. Blaine has Steph. Steph, played by James Spader. James Spader, I believe, steals the film. He's in like about 5 scenes. He is extraordinary. He even went to the audition in method, in character. He went there smoking a cigarette, being completely flippant and just condescending to Howard Deutsch, to everyone who was in the room, to Hughes, to everyone who was auditioning him. And they thought he was a jerk until they realized he was in character. And John Cryer was who he was actually closest to on set. And this is a real quote from James Spader. He said, "John, yeah, I think I got this teenage asshole thing on lock." And he really did. With Pretty in Pink, we are seeing James Spader create an archetype that would be followed for eons, all right? Steph walked so Chuck Bass could run. in projects like Gossip Girl. Steph is the inverse of Ducky, but he's just as powerful. Steph is conformity, ultra conformity, ultimate conformity personified and projected, amplified. He is like just how Ducky is the symbol of the eternal outsider. Steph is the symbol of eternal, perpetual conformity. And that conformity is fascist, that conformity is misogynist, that conformity is misanthropic, yet that conformity is also extremely sensitive. There's something brilliant about James Spader's characterization, his acting, when he's talking to Blaine. It reminds me a lot of Chuck Bass in Gossip Girl because he doesn't wanna lose Blaine, just like Ducky doesn't wanna lose Andy because, like, Andy gives Ducky, like, a reason to be. We don't get, like, the same kind of, like, passion from Steph and Blaine, but Steph, he often goes like, where is this coming from, Blaine? What's wrong, Blaine? Blaine, I'm not trying to say that, she's just trash, Blaine. Blaine, come on, what's wrong, man?" Like, and I think it's because he is the living symbolism of order, of conformity, and because he tried to buy Andy, right? Because he tried to purchase Andy's affection. And it's the one thing that he couldn't buy with all of his money, with all of his power. At least that's what's implied. And I think that James Spader created an archetype that was so intensely villainous and antagonistic, yet also sexy, that James Spader is now the stuff of a teen film legend. When they were casting Chuck Bass and Gossip Girl, Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage both said they wanted a James Spader type, an 80s erotic teen movie villain. And seeing it kind of established here, James Spader playing Steph, I think every one of his scenes, like I rewatch. I watch it once and I rewind it and I watch it again because there's a lot of complexity to his character. And you're seeing just how much James Spader, like actor as artist, is the one who is pushing this archetype forward. Like he is just as powerful as Ducky, and he symbolizes just as much as Ducky. But while Ducky is loud and musical and like super melodramatic and funny, because that's what the outsider archetype has come to represent. That's what outsiders do, and that's how they are. Steph is the inverse. He's calm, cool, collected, calculating, miserable. I think he's secretly self-hating, and he's arrogant. And I think he's petrified that Blaine is finding some sort of authenticity outside of the designated social roles. And that's why I think that Steph is such a fascinating character. And that's why I think Pretty in Pink works. It's not a love triangle. We should stop viewing it as a love triangle. And it's not about bridging. It's not about bridging the gap between interclass dating. That's not what it's about. It's literally about refusing the concept of the status quo. Blaine, he's disenchanted with the idea of his social role from the beginning. Like you can tell that with his eyes and with the ways that he looks at Andy and some of the things he says to her. He's very awkward and very sensitive, and I think very soulful and truthful. And Andy is searching for some sort of authenticity, some real kind of outsider visibility, and they find that within each other, and I think that is beautiful. I think it is beautiful, and you have Ducky on one side, as one extreme of extreme, rebellion, and then you have Steph on the opposite side at the other extreme of extreme ultimate conformity, and these 2 characters have to kind of find a way to distance themselves from those extremes. Now, Blaine distancing himself from Steph at the prom, like that makes a lot of sense, because like Steph is also fascist because conformity is intrinsically inherently fascist. Now, Ducky and Andy, that there's a part that has to keep the outsider spirit within her, because what they're doing is inherently outsider. They're refusing the status quo and they're kissing outside the prom, and it's also telling. That's why I think that this was if not deliberately designed in the script, it's how the script was actually designed, whether Hughes knows this or not. It's not a love triangle. It's not about the outsider conquering all. It's about concepts of outsider and concepts of rich elite not mattering. when it comes to young love. And I think that's a great message to send to teenagers and to anyone who needs to hear it. I think it's very telling that Ducky and Steph are the ones who have a physical altercation. They're the ones who fight each other in the hall after Ducky hears what Steph says to Blaine about Andy being trash and basically subhuman because she is a misfit and she's poor. And Ducky attacks Steph and they fight in the hallway. And those are the two extremes. Those are the ultimate form of rebellion and the ultimate form of conformity, fucking battling it out on the world stage, which is a high school hallway. I think that's really eloquent and that's very powerful. Pretty in Pink is delightful and it's masterful in a lot of ways. Uh, it's not a love triangle; it's a lot more than that. And if you haven't noticed, I'm wearing my Psychedelic Furs T-shirt. This is actually the record that Pretty in Pink was on. So great music as usual. That's really all I have to say about the film right now in the comments. What do you like about this movie?